I know of no better illustration of the depth of the swamp in Washington, D.C. than President Joe Biden's brazen $6 trillion spending plan to increase the size, scope, reach, and power of the federal government. And Nancy Pelosi has a plan for Republicans. She wants the votes on Joe Biden's agenda to be bipartisan. And so she introduced a tool back in March called earmarks. She wanted to bring back earmarks, which is the currency of corruption in Congress. It's a way to legally bribe a member of Congress for their vote on a big spending bill. Here's how it works. An earmark is a pork barrel member pet project, and leadership will insert that earmark into a bill as long as they have your vote. And you remember why earmarks were banned in 2011. Because it creates a favor factory in Congress, and oftentimes Republicans were leading on that favor factory. You remember in 2005, it was Republican Congressman Duke Cunningham out of San Diego, California, that admitted when he was indicted that he took $2.4 million worth of bribes, including a Rolls Royce, a yacht, and a 19th century Louis Philippe commode. It was Jack Abramoff who went to jail, the Republican lobbyist, for bribery and inserting earmarks into bills. So when Nancy Pelosi proposed bringing back this currency of corruption, unfortunately, Republicans wholeheartedly jumped in with her. A couple of weeks ago, the latest proposals on earmarks were released. And our auditors at OpenTheBooks.com did a hard look at those. We quantified it, we tied it out, and we found that Republicans were 6 out of the top 7 in terms of the members of Congress proposing the most earmarks. 14 out of the top 25 were Republicans. Republicans on dollars, gross dollars, had proposed $4.7 billion worth of earmarks, and Democrats $4.6 billion worth of earmarks. Here are some examples of some Republican earmarks. Upstate New York Congressman Chris Jacobs proposed spending $1.2 million of your money and my money on the Catanawanga trolley. In Illinois, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, he wants to build 2 new YMCAs in his district, spending $2 million of our tax dollars to do so. And the Dean of the U.S. Senate, he's been there since 1973, Don Young. Who is Don Young? Don Young still makes the argument that the bridge to nowhere, which was a $100 million earmark to build a bridge from mainland Alaska to an island that served less than 100 people, he still argues that was a good taxpayer investment and that bridge should have been built. His latest earmark proposal is to take $19 million of our money to build a new fire station in Kodiak, Alaska. And what's the public purpose to compel working and middle-class taxpayers in Colorado, in Illinois, or anywhere across the country to build a local fire station? I think here's a principle that we can all agree on. Local projects of merit need to be funded locally. Join me. Local projects of merit, we should not fund them out of Washington, D.C. And make no mistake, at OpenTheBooks.com, we are nonpartisan. We investigate Republicans, we investigate Democrats, and we audited the proposed earmarks coming from your congressional delegation right here in the state of Colorado. And here's what we found. 4 Democrats, they've earmarked initially $105 million of earmarks. You've got 3 Republicans, Buck, Bobart, Lamborn, $0. They're leading on this. They're standing up against the culture of corruption in Congress, and they deserve our support. I've got one objective here today, and that's to shine a white-hot spotlight on the size, scope, and power of government at every level, the depth of the swamp at the federal, state, and local level across the country. But first of all, I want to give you some background on our organization at OpenTheBooks.com. You see, we are based in Illinois, and in Illinois, it is the Super Bowl of corruption. Our #1 manufactured product is corruption. In a recent period, 4 out of our last 9 governors had served time in the federal penitentiary. In 2013, we actually had 2 governors, one from each party, Democrat Rod Blagojevich, Republican George Ryan, serving time in the federal pen at the same time. And one of Illinois' most famous citizens is Rahm Emanuel, and right now it's rumored that he's up for a Biden appointment as ambassador to Japan. And I remember in 2011, after he had left the Obama administration, he'd moved back to Chicago to run for mayor, and Rahm Emanuel was running on a good government platform. Rahm Emanuel promised to end the historic culture of corruption in City Hall. Rahm Emanuel promised to end the corrupt practice of pay-to-play. Pay-to-play is when you receive a campaign donation and a city vendor expects a city contract. And sure enough, after Emanuel won for office, he issued an executive order banning the practice. If you were a city contractor, you could not give his campaign fund a donation. Fast forward to his reelection in 2015, and I remember receiving a call from the Emmy Award-winning journalist then at Fox News headquarters in New York City, John Stossel. And Stossel asked me, Adam, can you fact-check Emanuel's promise? And I said, yes, we can. And we took 10 years of the city of Chicago checkbook, we mashed it up against Rahm Emanuel's campaign donor disclosures, and here's what we found. 600 city vendors gave Rahm Emanuel $7 million worth of campaign donations, and those vendors over a decade had reaped $2 billion in city payments. In God we trust. Illinois politicians, we must audit. My name is Adam Angie-eff-ski, and I founded OpenTheBooks.com on the clear vision to capture and post online every dime taxed and spent at every level of government across the entire country. And that's why I am hopeful and optimistic about our future, despite the corruption in Illinois and across the country. You and I have been given the greatest gift in the last 5,000 years of human history. And it's a constitution that recognizes our inalienable rights. In America, the citizen is sovereign. We understand that our rights come from God and not government. And we instituted a government to secure our rights. And our founders knew that they had to give the tools to citizens to be able to hold that government accountable. Our founders knew and understood that knowledge is power. And so they wrote transparency into the United States Constitution. And it's Article 1, Section 9, and it states that a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. And today, it's the internet age. It's the age of big data. There's a clear interpretation. Post every dime online in real time. Open the books. And that's our mission at OpenTheBooks.com. We've built the world's largest private database of public sector expenditures. Last year, we actually filed 40,000 Freedom of Information Act requests, and that had never been done in the history of the country. We have successfully captured $6 trillion just last year in federal, state, and local spending. And here's what our database is comprised of. Since the year 2001, all federal checkbook expenditures. In the states, 49 out of 50 states with their checkbook expenditures, most of those going back a decade. And then we did something that had never been done in the history of the country. In 50,000 of the most substantial public bodies, we've captured virtually every single public employee's salary and pension record at every level of government across the entire country. That's 23 million records last year, and we've done that for each of the last 3 years. Right here in Colorado, you can come to our website and you can look up the salaries of 250,000 public employees at the state and local level all across the state of Colorado. Now, many people want to know who is the number one most highly compensated federal employee. And there's 4.3 million of them, so that's quite a question, in the military branches and the executive agencies, the boards and commissions and other agencies, and at the United States Post Office. So could it be House Speaker Nancy Pelosi? She made $223,500 last year. Vice President Kamala Harris makes $235,000. So could the most highly compensated federal employee be the employee with the most responsibility? The rare and prestigious 4-star generals in the United States military make a little bit less than $270,000, and underneath their command are millions of civilians and soldiers. Could it be the President of the United States? President Joe Biden makes $400,000. And if you thought any of those were true, you're wrong. The most highly compensated federal employee today is, of course, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Last year, he made $435,000. And you'd think he'd be a little better with the science. First, no masks, then 1 mask, then 2 masks, then masks forever. Now this week we know from his emails that he doesn't think a mask purchased at a drugstore can prevent the coronavirus. We're holding payrolls at the federal level back to 2007, and I can tell you that Anthony Fauci, as late as 2015, made $335,000. So just in the last 6 fiscal years, Anthony Fauci has received a $100,000 salary pay spike. And the federal bureaucracy across the entire continuum is very expensive. We do oversight reports at OpenTheBooks.com, and we did an oversight report called Mapping the Administrative State, a Study of the Swamp. And here's what we found. We found that the federal bureaucracy and the executive agencies cost $1 million a minute, $500 million a day. And there's a new minimum wage for a federal bureaucrat, and that wage is $100,000 a year. You see, actually, in the 78 largest federal agencies, that's the average salary is now 6 figures, $100,000. But of course, on the federal pay package, it's not only about the salary, it's about the benefits. Paid time off. Incredibly, if you hit your 3-year anniversary as a federal employee, you get 43 days of paid time off. That's 10 holidays, 13 sick days, and 20 vacation days. Now, I want to take a poll of the room here. Raise your hand if you get 43 days of paid time off. And I'm actually not seeing any hands go up. There was 1 hand in the very back. And that's because this isn't France. We estimate that small perk at the federal level costs taxpayers, you and I, $20 billion a year, because when employees have all this paid time off, the employee head counts, you have to hire more employees. We figure that's a $20 billion cost to the American people. But it's not only about the high salaries and the very lucrative and generous paid time off, it's also about the bonuses. Last year, we know that 1 million federal employees received a performance bonus, and that cost the American taxpayer $1.1 billion. And that mystifies a lot of people. How can 1 million federal employees receive a bonus? Most people don't think government is running that well. And I can't tell you who got the bonus, but we did dig deep. And here's what we found. Here's how 1 million federal employees get a performance bonus. It's because 99.6% of those workers are rated as fully successful. And that's actually impossible. The advertised purity of Ivory soap is only 99.4%. We do have a transparency problem with the bonuses. I can't tell you who received them. They won't disclose it. They say the federal agencies negotiated away our right to know by virtue of the union contract. Join me. We need federal legislation to open up the bonuses. We need to be able to see who received what. You and I need to be able to follow the money and hold the administrative class accountable for tax and spend decisions. Well, what we found at OpenTheBooks.com is that there's 500,000 federal employees with salaries north of six figures, $100,000. That's our threshold of highly compensated. But we found that the federal swamp is now dwarfed across America by the state and local swamp. You see, there's 2.1 million highly compensated public employees at every level of government across the country, and that means while the federal level has 500,000, the state and local level has 1.6 million. I want to give you some examples of the largesse. In the city of New York, because of the union contract, the school district janitors out-earn the principals. If you're a janitor in the New York City public schools, you can make up to $210,000. The principals make around $156,000. In New York, of course, we have Governor Andrew Cuomo. And Andrew Cuomo is the most highly compensated governor ever in the history of the country. This year, he can take $250,000. He was given this pay spike before he issued his executive order to send COVID-positive seniors back to the nursing homes, allegedly cooked the books on the senior deaths in those nursing homes, before 9 women alleged sexual harassment against him, and before the Attorney General opened up an investigation on whether he used state employees' state resources to write his book, which he received $4 million on. In Illinois, you can be a tree trimmer in Chicago and lop off $105,000 of cash compensation. And it's not only blue states, but it's red states that have problems like Texas. Down in the poor border community of Laredo, Texas, the average household income is less than $20,000. But in the last 3 fiscal years, the city manager position, the council in Laredo has paid $1.9 million into that position over the course of the last 3 years. We just had a city attorney in Pasadena, Texas, retire, and his last year, he was able to pull cash compensation of over $900,000. But of course, nothing rivals the state of California. It's truly the Golden State, with nearly 400,000 six-figure public employees alone in the state of California. And I hope you saw at the Wall Street Journal and at Forbes our investigation of the top-paid LA County lifeguards. Life's a beach life's a beach if you're an LA County lifeguard. You can make up to $392,000 a year. We found 81 of the lifeguards made over $200,000. 7 made between $300,000 and $392,000. We found 31 on overtime alone made between $50,000 and $131,000 last year on overtime alone. The top paid lifeguard, a single lifeguard, reaped $630,000 over the course of the last 5 years on overtime alone. And it's 30 years and out, so you can retire at age 50 as an LA County lifeguard on a lifetime pension of up to 79% of your cash compensation with cost of living adjustment. We have a lot of work to do. And at OpenTheBooks.com, we encourage you to use our data and hold the political class accountable at every level of government across the entire country for their tax and spend decisions. And here in Colorado, you can do that. In Colorado, looks good on paper, but there are issues. So you've got a little less than 20,000 six-figure public employees. But just on a 5-minute review of our database, I found that the city manager in Lakewood made $331,000 last year. And Lakewood has a population of 157 people. Put that in perspective. Embattled Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Chicago has 2.7 million people, and last year Lightfoot made $216,000. You've got a county administrator. Well, in this actually a small town of Fort Morgan, you've got a city manager, and I think Fort Morgan Fort Morgan has 11,000 people, and last year he made 227,000. In the Mapletown Public Schools, you have a superintendent there that made nearly $300,000, and Maplewood has about 9,000. Mapletown has about 9,000 students in the school district. Put that in perspective. A cabinet-level position in Washington, D.C. at the Department of Education, the secretary makes $199,000. You have Gunnison County right here, the manager. There's less than 18,000 residents in the community. The manager last year made $236,000. So it is time at all levels, starting where we live. We can't complain about Washington, D.C. unless we have good government where we live. This is the training ground. We complain about D.C., but we've got to get our own house in order, where we have reputation, where we know how to get things done, and where we have network. I want to tell you a story of how OpenTheBooks.com, our organization, fact-checked the political promise of the San Francisco mayor, London Breed. We noticed that in 2017, Breed was running for mayor of San Francisco on a promise to clean up the city streets of San Francisco. You know, San Francisco has a homeless problem with about 8,000 homeless people, and many of those folks are defecating on city streets. Breed ran for office promising to clean up the streets. So after she was in office for a year, our auditors fact-checked her promise. And here's what we found. We found that in 2011, there was 5,500 cases called into the city's 311 line of human waste in the public way. By 2015, that number had increased to 13,000. By 2017, when Breed was running for office, that number had gone to 20,000. In her first year in office, in 2018, that number spiked to 28,000. In the year 2019, that number went to 31,000 cases of human waste in the public way. Over the 9-year period we looked at, we mapped 140,000 cases of calls of human waste in the public way. Now, when we downloaded the file in the city's 311 office, we noticed it came with latitude and longitude. So we did what any auditor would do. We mapped it on our interactive mapping platform, every single case. And yes, we did use brown pins. And let me tell you, there is a brownout in the Bay Area. The whole city was covered in brown pins. Many of you probably remember that map. It trended on national Twitter, and I'm proud to say it helped reframe the national debate on the homeless. With 140,000 cases of human waste in the public way, that is a human health catastrophe. So what government program is running well? Could it be farm subsidies in America's urban areas where there are no farms? We did an oversight report of United States farm subsidies flowing into America's major cities, like New York, Chicago, and Washington, D.C., tens of millions of dollars annually of farm subsidies. And my favorite example comes out of Chicago. I guess the Illinois corruption stories are always the best. Reverend Minister Louis Farrakhan, the founder of the Nation of Islam, is a farmer. And over a 17-year period, mailed to his home in Hyde Park, Chicago, was $317,000 worth of federal farm subsidies. So you tell me, what government program is running well? Could it be the federal grant-making subsidy program? Every year, about $700 billion of federal grants goes out the door. And we believe that America needs a war on waste. You remember the late U.S. Senator Dr. Tom Coburn. Tom Coburn had an example of the millions of taxpayer dollars that put shrimp on treadmills. Many of you remember the good Democrat from Wisconsin, the U.S. Senator William Proxmire. He issued his Golden Fleece Awards. And in his obituary at the New York Times, they highlighted one of those awards. Proxmire gave a Golden Fleece Award to the FAA for $60,000 on a study of 432 flight attendants and the measurements of their buttocks and how they arranged their knees when they sat down. For all of you out there thinking that government is honest, effective, and serves people that have real needs, at OpenTheBooks.com, we have the evidence that suggests otherwise. There was a $1 million grant to an Ivy League college, Cornell University, with a very large endowment. They can't make the case they need our money, that they need taxpayer money. $1 million went for a study where it hurts the most to be stung by a bee. It's the nostril. NASA gave $1 million to prepare the nation's religions for the discovery of extraterrestrial life. $1.4 million on a grant was to teach California prostitutes sex education. They could probably teach their own class. Just recently, $2.1 million, you see it's always worse, $2.1 million went for sex education for the prostitutes in Ethiopia. We can't make America great again until we make America accountable again. So what government program is running well? Could it be Joe Biden's American Rescue Act? That was $1.9 trillion. That passed Congress on a party line vote. Every Democrat voted for it. Every Republican voted against it in both houses. Biden signed it. And it contained $350 billion to bail out states and 30,000 localities. So our auditors downloaded that file, we reorganized it, and here's what we found. The top 50 richest places in America received $100 million out of that bill. So it's places like Atherton, California, the richest place in the country. The average household income is $525,000, and they received $1.2 million of our money bailing them out. It's Greenwich, Connecticut, $21 million. That's the wealthy community that all the elite New Yorkers fled to last summer. It's the Hamptons at $8 million. It's Key West in Florida at $10 million. For crying out loud, zip code 90210, Beverly Hills, California, received $6.2 million of federal bailout. The county of Silicon Valley received $400 million worth of bailout from Congress, and they can pay their own way. And all that's dumb, but here's what's a little dumber. The red state of Utah, they had a $1.7 billion surplus, and Congress bailed them out for another $1.7 billion. Right here in Colorado, you had a surprise in your budget, $3.8 billion surplus, and Congress just sent you another $4 billion worth of bailout. And I read in the papers, your governor doesn't even know how to spend it. He's doing a listening tour, and the rumor is they're going to give a big fat pay hike to the state's public employees. Right here in Colorado, the fourth richest community in the United States is Cherry Hills Village. Average household income is $400,000. And Cherry Hills just was bailed out in the American Rescue Act to the tune of $1.4 million, and they don't need that money either. But California, they're getting rich off of all of us. California just announced the surprise $75 billion bailout, or surplus in their budget, and Congress had bailed out California for $26 billion. So what in the COVID-19 response is running well? In the American Rescue Act for K through 12 schools, that act provided $128 billion for K through 12 schools. On the pandemic year of 2020, through the CARES Act, through the end of the year budget, K through 12 schools had reaped $80 billion. It was so much money they couldn't even spend it all. There was $10 billion left over. When the American Rescue Act was passed, then in one fell swoop, $128 extra billion for K through 12 schools. And now we know 95% of it won't even be spent till after the pandemic is over, between the year 2022 through 2028. If you think government is running honestly, efficiently, and serves people that have real needs, here's a test. In March of last year, in April, at the height of the fear and of the economic policies at the federal government and the state, 44 million people lost their jobs. And Congress threw $860 billion, and rightly so, at the unemployment program to help people who had lost their jobs, families that had real pain. And now we know the upper end estimates of the fraud is up to $200 billion that the criminals, the crime syndicates, and the con artists have stolen from that program, with an abject lack of internal accounting controls at the federal and state and local levels on the unemployment insurance plan. It is the largest public fraud in the history of the country and a massive failure at every level of the public sector here in this country. We have a lot of work to do at every level of government in this entire country. And I don't want you on its face to take my word for something. Let's take the federal government's word on this next one. Improper payments. There's a required report from the federal agencies to Congress posted on the Office of Management and Budget website every single year that details the improper and mistaken payments that the federal agencies, the 20 largest agencies, admit to every year. And we totaled it up since 2004, and it's $2.5 trillion. But let's just go through last year. The IRS admits to $18 billion of improper payments in one program, their earned income tax program. One out of every $4 in the Internal Revenue Services program they admit was improperly spent. Here's the definition of an improper payment: a payment to the wrong person in the wrong amount or under the wrong set of federal rules, or all of the above. When I reached out to the IRS for comment, the spokesman said, yes, it's true, and it's going to continue because we don't have the resources to claw it back and stop it. So they can identify it, but they can't stop it in the internet age. Social Security Administration, $8 billion worth of improper payments. And we dug a little deeper on that. And we found that Social Security actually has 6 million active Social Security numbers for people aged 112 and over. The problem is there's only 40 of those people alive in the entire world. Medicaid and Medicare. I remember when Barack Obama promised to audit Medicaid and Medicare and use the savings to fund Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. See, at the time, there was about $64 billion worth of improper payments in Medicaid and Medicare. The audit never happened. By 2016, the amount of improper payments had gone up to $88 billion. And last year, the improper payments in Medicaid and Medicare have peaked at $103 billion. And the Democrats want to put Medicare on steroids? Are you kidding me? There's a lot of work to do across the entire continuum. But I'm going to give you, if you're an elected official, I'm going to give you a 4-point strategy to declare war on waste. We put this strategy together for President Donald Trump, and 6 times in the Wall Street Journal and at USA Today, on double-facing pages, we ran our open letter to the president. And he had adopted the measures by the fiscal year 2021 budget, which came out in February of 2020, right ahead of the pandemic. He issued a chapter inspired by our work called Eliminating Wasteful Government Spending in the President's Budget to Congress. Here's the 4 point. Obviously, when the pandemic hit, the plans went out the window and spending went on steroids, unfortunately. But here's the 4-point plan that can work for any executive, the President of the United States and the head of any county, town, water district, mosquito abatement district. First step, open and audit the books. Second step, hold yourself accountable by inviting the public and your employees to whistleblow on the waste. Step 3, cut the waste. And step 4, close the feedback loop with the public. Report to the citizens how your program is going and the savings and how you have limited the size, scope, and power of your unit of government and maximize the efficiency and the honesty of your unit of government. In 2017, we did an oversight report of the United States Department of Education. Betsy DeVos was the secretary of the department, and we were pretty hard on the agency. As a part of that report, we identified that there was $6 billion worth of overpayments on Pell Grants and student loans. And Betsy DeVos got right to work on that. The very next year, she had cut back her mistaken and improper payments to $1 billion. Now, she'll probably tell you that's still too much money. It's $1 billion of overpayments on student loans and Pell Grants. But she cut 85% of her improper payments, and that, join me on this, that is real leadership by Secretary DeVos. If you're an activist sitting out there, I want to give you hope. You may think elections are rigged. It's very tough to win for office against the establishment of both parties. Colorado is a Dillon's rule state. Dillon's rule means that an elected official does not have the power to spend unless expressly authorized by statute. If you have a county whose executives being nice and doling out gift cards for Christmas gifts, that's illegal spending. If he's using his credit card to do private purchases, that's illegal spending. You have a tremendous tool at the grassroots level to open the books, step 1. Review that local spending and ask questions of your public official. And here's the question. Where in the law do you get the power to make that expenditure? Point to me to the law that authorizes that expenditure. Now, an answer to that question may require you to network up to 500 of your friends and family into the public meetings where you use public comment to shine the light. That creates a media event on transparency and on accountability, and typically the press is with you on that endeavor. This is the most robust watchdog model in the country. It has been pioneered out of Illinois by 2 retired military veterans, Kirk Allen and John Kraft at the Edgar County Watchdogs, and they have forced in a 6-year period over 400 corrupt Illinois politicians out of office who have fled in the face of their aggressive transparency. In 2014 and 15, I applied this model at my local junior college, the College of DuPage. The College of DuPage is the 2nd largest college in Illinois, 26,000 students. The first thing I did, I knew that the governor of Illinois was coming to the campus for commencement. So I filed a Freedom of Information Act request to the president of the school for his emails, and I uncovered a very unethical strategy between the president and the board of trustees at the school to bring political support to our Democratic governor, Pat Quinn, in exchange for shaking loose a $20 million state construction grant for the school. When we unearthed that email, showcased that strategy, we stopped that grant. The school had been saying that they had been transparent with every dime of spending. And we fact-checked that promise, and we found they used an archaic slush fund impressed accounting scheme to hide $100 million of line-by-line checkbook spending over a 6-year period. Now, what in Illinois could be hidden in $100 million? Well, we found that the president of the school, and he went to Botswana, Africa, and shot an African elephant. He billed off his expenditures out of that impressed accounting fund for his global satellite phones. We found that up to $500,000 of wine and wine accessories were tagged as instructional supplies and flowed through that impressed account. We found that the school built an upscale French restaurant, including a world-class wine cellar, and hired a French sommelier, billing off most of it through that account. We took a look at the chief radio station engineer who had opened up his own company, unbeknownst to the college, and billed off $500,000 worth of charges through his own business. When we showcased that, the local district attorney indicted him for insider trading, and he pled guilty, restitution of $400,000, and he pled to an 8-year sentence in the penitentiary, and he was stripped of his public pension. Applying this model led the board of trustees to fire the president of the school, the comptroller of the school, and the treasurer of the school. A new board was elected. They cut student tuition, they cut property taxes, and there was a new day at the College of DuPage, and that's why we say that transparency revolutionizes United States public policy and politics. I want to close with the following story. Our honorary chairman, the late Dr. Tom Coburn, was the legendary U.S. Senator from Oklahoma, a small state senator, and he ran on transparency. And they called him Dr. No because he stopped so many pork barrel expenditure bills by using Senate rules to stop that waste. And what he couldn't stop, he showcased in his waste book reports to embarrass his colleagues on good government. And Time magazine recognized Coburn in 2013 as one of the 100 most influential persons in the world, and they put him on that list. And when Coburn left the Senate, he told the following story. You see, Coburn was a true citizen legislator. More than anything else, he loved delivering babies. He loved being a doctor and a physician. He had delivered 4,000 babies back in his small town in Oklahoma. And he said, sometimes on the law of large numbers, you knew you had a problem with the delivery when the baby's heartbeat, which is normally 140 to 150 beats a minute, falls to 50 or 60 beats a minute. Coburn said, when you saw that on the monitor, you had 3 minutes to make a decision. You had 3 minutes to save the life of the mother, to save the life of the baby. He said you had options. You could go for the forceps. You could go for the vacuum extractor. You could make the decision to wheel the mother out of labor and delivery, put her up on the table, cut a hole in her belly, and do a C-section and save the baby. But Coburn said, you had to make a decision. And he said that is instructive for each and every one of us today. Coburn said, in America, this is our 3-minute moment. We have to stand up against government overreach, against big spending, against big encroachment of government at every level. We have to stand up and make sure that government is responsive to we the people. In 2008, the national debt was $10 trillion. After 8 years of Barack Obama, the national debt was $18 trillion. After 4 years of Donald Trump and a national pandemic, we're at $28 trillion of national debt. And after the American Rescue Act, that $2 trillion bill, we're north of $30 trillion on the national debt. We have principles. We have courage. Lock arms with us at OpenTheBooks.com. We need to start fighting on hard facts. When we open the books, follow the money, and have the facts, we win and they lose. Thank you. Thanks for joining the transparency revolution.